Todo sale de eso. Bueno, y also becomes free, porque también.
Come away with me.
had it moisturized. They have stuff there. I'll just stay here with you ladies.
Called the Palmer Archipelago, and generally they provide good protection for operations. So even if we have overcast days, if we have snow, generally will give us a good protections in terms of wind, so we can provide some landings for you on that area. So let's start with the area of the South Shetland Islands. Here you see some of the names. If you remember that I mentioned the area where there is a landing strip, will be here in King George Island. On this area, the Chilean Air Force has a landing strip which they keep operational. Most of the scientists will come by air to this area, and then by ship will be delivered to the scientific stations. And also it's a place, it's a little bit of a larger population on that particular spot. As we sail south, we're gonna pass this area. Around 3:30, 4 o'clock is when we expect to be crossing what is called the Nelson Strait, and we'll be seeing already the Antarctic land ahead of the ship. With these hours that we gain, even though we had to reduce the speed because of the storm, I mean, this is not used to get full speed into these moving seas. You had to take care of the ship, we had to take care of everybody. So the ship slowed down when we were having the heart of the storm. We do have some hours, and the captain, as we pass here, will do some scenic cruise with the ship. So one of the reasons we change in the recap with the lecture is that in the afternoon, depending on the time we arrive to these areas, you have the opportunity to go out, and at the same time you already will have the information regarding what we do in the next day. So in that way, we will not cancel the recap, and you will not have no idea of what's happening tomorrow. So tomorrow morning, already tonight, the ship will be drifting around the Bransfield Strait and eventually make it to this area between Greenwich and Livingston Island. And out there is a small island called Half Moon Island. This will be our first intended destination. Please do not be surprised if you arrive there tomorrow morning and you hear a different name. Changes may happen depending on the weather, although we are expecting some fair weather for tomorrow, but changes may happen. So our destination for tomorrow is Half Moon Island. This is the area where we plan to do our operations, depending again on the seas, depending on the winds that we will encounter. The ship might be inside this bay, or they might be outside. So originally our intention is to be as close as possible, and we plan to land you on this small corner. This is a satellite picture from Half Moon Island, from the corner where we plan to do our operations. This picture was taken when the area was completely covered with the snow. We have reports that most of the snow is already gone, so we should be landing on some pebbles and some stone on the landing site. So another picture on another time of the year. You see a beautiful picture here of Half Moon in the middle of the bay. Surrounding the area, you'll see beautiful glaciers and mountains. Snow-capped mountains. Did I say that right? Yes, thank you. So here again, our landing site from above. And this is a view from the water as we approach the area. So first of all, we have the landing site on a pebble beach. Then we have a small incline that you should get up to go towards the area where the penguins are nesting. So you see a line of people around here. This is more or less the route that we're going to be following to do our visit. And at the end of this area, there is a penguin highway that we keep clear of. The drivers on your boat, as you approach the landing area, will give you instructions. It will be particularly important if for whatever reason we go into another location. So the drivers in the boat will give you that minute information as you approach the landing site. They will let you know, okay, this is the landing site, this is the route, here are the flags. Once you come to shore and disembark from the Zodiacs, you will see a few elements. First, the life jacket beams. Again, we do recommend that you keep your life jacket with you at all times. Just keep wearing them. But if you feel that you don't want to be carrying them around, we have these jacket beams on the shore. We have some flags. These flags will be placed on a cross if it's an area that we don't want you to be going. If it's an area that poses some challenges or maybe artifacts that we don't want to disturb. And then we have some standing flags will be the route that it will follow. Please, when you are on the shore side, just look towards the next flag and try to follow it in that direction. Half Moon Island has some vegetation, and we try to not damage or disturb the vegetation. And again, if there is a lot of snow in some of the areas, it will indicate the more compact route that you will follow on the snow. Once you have done the visit, and around the shore side, there will be the expedition staff to give you information on the natural history. There will be the expedition staff on the shore to receive the. At the end, when we come back, we'll have these guanomatics placed on the shore. Now, this is for the cleanup of the boots before you come back into the ship. These brushes, they have these handles on the side, so you can go into them and just clean up your boots. Some vigorous scrubbing will just get rid of any material that might be trapped in your boots when you go in. Now, the next slide will show you who has to wake up the earliest tomorrow. Are you ready? Yes. Do you remember your colors? Yes, here we go. So tomorrow we start with the white group. Is that the green clapping? Yes. So our first disembarkation will start at 8 o'clock, of course, provided all conditions are good. Then we have 9:30, 11, 12. This information will be in the herald, all right? So you will see this in the herald. Please do make sure you have your armband and your identification card all placed on the left arm to go for security. So white, red, blue, purple, green. Ladies and gentlemen, this order is not a continuous order. So for other days, it is mixed up. So white would not get to go at 2 o'clock tomorrow, after tomorrow, all right? And then red doesn't get to go at 8 o'clock the next day. So this order is kind of random. We receive this from head office, and then we'll inform you of the order for each day. Ladies and gentlemen, once we go ashore, we'll do our visit on the shore side from the island. We're gonna head south through the Brownsville Strait. Depending on the time of the day, we might be sailing close to Deception Island, which is an active volcano. So if we are good conditions, if the weather is good, please do listen for announcement. We will have the staff out on deck. We might have some commentary up from the bridge regarding the features that we're passing. So just be aware that coming back to the ship, it doesn't mean everything is finished. We still might be doing something with the ship on the way as we go to the next location. And although this area is usually protected from seas and wind, every once in a while the wind picks up and it might be a little bit rough. So it doesn't mean that it's going to be rough tomorrow, but be aware that just because we are in this area, it's not going to be completely flat calm. But generally, it is good conditions on the site. A few reminders to recap for everybody. So the landing should last about 90 minutes. Your driver on your boat, once you go ashore, will give you the time. So you do not need to, wait for this, says 9:30 is the last one. Follow the timing for your boat. Of course, you don't need to wait until the very last minute. If you decide to go beforehand, you can come to the landing site and we'll send you to the Zodiacs. We're going to be walking up and down some inclines on the small stones, snow, rocks. And do remember, please do open your parka to ventilate, do not overheat. Just because we told you to wear 10,000 layers, you don't have to be closed down like a spacesuit. Make sure you ventilate so you do not overheat in your clothing. Walking sticks, yes, recommended, particularly because of the incline. If the staff has not done this for you during the biosecurity briefing, please do remove the plastic and rubber tips so they are not being left behind. Of course, if they are very well secured, that's absolutely fine, but we don't want to leave anything behind. And if you're using those snow baskets on the tip of your walking poles, just make sure they are very tight and secure so we don't lose them behind as we're walking around. Again, we recommend that you keep your life jacket on while we're ashore, and what we expect to see. We'll have an encounter with chinstrap penguins, provided, of course, we are at the right place tomorrow morning, that we are able to take you ashore. This probably will be the only opportunity where we have an encounter with chinstrap penguins. So that's what we expect to see. We will be seeing some kelp gulls, skuas, giant petrels. There will be a variety of bird life that might be around. And every once in a while, a seal might pop up. If we do find a seal, we'll let you know when you come to shore, so to make sure that you have a view of this animal. Again, do respect the penguin highways. The expedition staff will be placed in key locations just to make sure we will not disturb the animals. And kayak tickets. If you're doing the kayaking, you will be receiving tonight around 9 o'clock or just after dinner. You should be receiving those on your suite. Please make sure you check the timing for your kayak excursion. Weather, how the weather is going to be tomorrow. This is a prediction provided by the Norwegian Meteorological Institute. Usually it's very reliable, but when they miss, it's a complete disaster. So, on this axle. Yeah, I know, it's just too funny for my own good, right? Yeah, my mom wanted me to be a comedian, and everybody laughs, so they say, I'm going to be a biologist instead. So on this column, we have the temperatures on degrees Celsius. This is 0, when the area when we have the 0 clouds. The blue line indicates the variation of the temperature. On the lower axle, we have the hour of the day on the 24-hour system. This indicates the beginning of the day on Sunday, so we have the grid, and the bottom graphic indicates the direction and the speed of the winds. We do have, I believe we do have this available on the iPad as an app, so you can also check out the weather conditions. Half Moon Island tomorrow, so around 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, this time is in Zulu time. It's in 0, so it's the British time, so you have to take 3 hours out of it. So we expecting winds that might be between 5, this is half leg here, to 10 knots. That is very good. We can deal with the snow, we can deal with rain, but if the wind picks up, it's our worst enemy. So 10 knots is fairly reasonable for us to operate. So fingers crossed that this prediction is good. We do expect some overcast, and towards the end of the day, hopefully when we are cruising out with the ship, we might have maybe a little bit of sunshine out there. So be prepared for those weather conditions. Another thing we're keeping an eye on is ice conditions. We do receive ice charts from satellite service. This is also for the Norwegian Meteorological Institute. The blue indicates fairly clear of ice. The darker the color, the more ice there is in the area. So this is something that we always keep looking in regards to the area that we are operating. So these are the South Shetland Islands once again. This is the Antarctic Sound. And you can see that pretty much in terms of ice near the areas, the coastal areas that we hope to be exploring tonight and tomorrow, there is not much ice, so that should be fairly easy for us to navigate. As we go farther south, do remember that the ice conditions, the visibility change. So we have expected speeds to reach from one location to the other, but of course, number one priority on board the ship with the captain is the safety of everybody as we go back and forth. So if timing changed, might be because of the particular conditions at that moment. If we have to delay, we will make an announcement, Jen, on the the PA system. We'll be making announcements regarding delays. So please do make a point of listening to those, particularly if you are the next group disembarking. There might be a 5, 10, 30, 1 hour delay, depending on the conditions on the disembarkation of the groups. We don't want you to keep you waiting all dressed up for 1 hour, so those announcements are very important so you're not uncomfortable as you wait for your group disembarkation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence here today. We're going to start with our first recap of the trip. And afterwards, I'll be around on the back of the salon if anyone has any questions regarding tomorrow's activities. Thank you very much.
Okay, so there's several ways to define Antarctica. One way is the political method. Okay, the political method sets Antarctica at 60 degrees south. So that includes a lot of water as well. Essentially, that's the extent of the Antarctic Treaty. You'll be learning more about that. This is a marvelous piece of legislation that keeps Antarctica run by committee, essentially, a committee of countries. This chart here is an old map, an old relic, that shows how pre-treaty Antarctica was cut into slices, into wedges of pie, and different countries had different claims. So, for example, the place we're going to right now had overlapping claims between Argentina and Chile and Britain. When the treaty came into place, all that went to one side. All countries agreed to temporarily suspend their claims on these different places and areas. So Antarctica could be declared politically as anything 60 degrees south. We are now more than 60 degrees south, so by the political guideline, we are in Antarctica. Another way is through the geographic boundary of Antarctica. Now, most people would say, well, once you're on the land of Antarctica, doesn't that count? Well, what about the islands of Antarctica? Do they count? Absolutely, because an island is simply currently an island because of the current state of sea level. Sea level changes all the time. If sea level were to drop, you discover that those islands are in fact connected to the mainland. And also, Antarctica is confusing because it has a massive ice sheet that doubles in size during the winter time. Once you're on that ice sheet, are you in Antarctica? I would argue you are. The best way to define whether or not you're in Antarctica, for me as a biologist, is a biological boundary, an oceanographic boundary. So we do this through using a specific oceanographic event called the Antarctic convergence. This is a very specific oceanographic phenomenon. You can't see it with your eyes, but boy, can you feel it. It has to do with currents and temperature. So I will be talking more about this in a different lecture, but if you have a look at this chart here, this is all the currents that we have in the world. So you can see in the southern hemisphere we have these large currents called gyres that go around the entire basin, but at the bottom we have one current that goes all the way around the world like a giant cog of water. This is called the Antarctic circumpolar current. And as a result of that, you can see it quite easily in these color-enhanced satellite images. You've been seeing some of these on our iPads. If you come up onto deck and you ask to see some of these charts, we have these available to you real time. So this one is for wind strengths. By the way, that's what we just had. That was the storm right there. So we're now down here somewhere. And you can see that there's a general sort of circular pattern to the winds in that area. That helps drive that Antarctic circumpolar current. Here's a similar chart. Now we're looking at currents, which are being driven by the winds, and also temperature. So red is hot, blue is cold. See how there's a really distinct boundary here where all of a sudden the water gets really, really cold. Now, it turns out that if you were to look at this three-dimensionally, you can see the same thing. This is a cross-section of the Atlantic basin. This is Antarctica. This is up towards the Arctic. The equator is here roughly somewhere. And what we have here is, again, color-coded. Purple is what us scientists call jolly cold. This is medium cold. This is, and then red is, You're not going to get any water unless you're having your shower for the next couple of weeks. So you see here very distinct boundaries. It's not so much that we have a specific color, it's how quickly it changes color. That indicates to us what we say in oceanography, a front, an oceanic front, which is a joining between two water masses. Three-dimensionally, this is what it looks like. This will be on the test at the end of the trip. I expect you to memorize it all. Essentially, you have to think three-dimensionally. It's like water folding upon itself. Okay, so in the Antarctic coastline, which is here, you've got this really, really cold water coming down, sinking down below warmer water coming up from above and so on. And here is the Antarctic convergence, essentially layers of different temperature and salinity waters. These fronts are essential because they help keep the biology in. Plankton can't pass these fronts because they represent rapid changes in density. The best way to see it for us, because you can't actually see it physically, is to take temperatures. So we use temperatures from the engine coolant to monitor air temperature and also water temperature. The blue line is water temperature, the orange line is our air temperature, and you can see how it goes along and then it drops very suddenly right here and right here. Around about, this was about midnight last night, we passed the convergence. And at that point, we were in Antarctica. Of course, we were all asleep. Or maybe watching The Magician, one of the two. When you get there, when you get to the convergence, and we have passed it at this point, what do we see? We see reduced visibility. There's some fog associated with the convergence because cold water brings down the dew point of the air, and so you have fog. You start to see a lot more animals. How about those fin whales? Wow, right? Probably 100 to 200 animals in the past 8 hours or so. And you get quite a dramatic drop in temperature, which I'm sure you've all felt. So that is technically what you see at the convergence, right there. Absolutely nothing, because it's foggy. However, it was at night, so that's what you saw when you saw the convergence. Okay, that's it from me. I'll now introduce Rachel.
Being out there on deck with everyone throughout the day, watching all the whales as we were going by, some of them some really close sightings. But if you might have been looking outside or maybe outside your window or out on deck with us, you would have noticed that there were some patches of water that we went through that just seemed like there were hours and there were no seabirds, no life. And then all of a sudden there'd be a couple whales and then they'd pass by and then there'd be another little bit of nothing. And so I just wanted to talk about a theme that will come up throughout this voyage, which is called upwelling. And it helps us to understand where and when we might see animals and kind of explain the pattern of as we go farther south and are in closer to the Antarctic continent and to the peninsula, why we tend to see more life. So upwelling, or nutrient upwelling, is essentially water that's flowing deep along the very bottom of the ocean. It's hitting a landmass or an obstruction in the way, and it's forced up to the surface. It's very similar to what air currents are doing when they go over mountains. They're rising up. And this deep water that's flowing up to the surface, hitting a boundary, often is loaded with nutrients that there are typically little of in the upper layers of the water column. So as Sean was talking about warmer waters sitting on top of colder, denser water, you have this phenomenon here where you have the warm water being pushed away and this cold water coming up from below, and it's bringing with it all these nutrients that life needs. And it's bringing those nutrients up into the layers of the water column that the sunlight can penetrate to, which is typically about 200 meters and up to the surface. You get enough sunlight in that zone that you can have photosynthesis occurring. And photosynthesis and all the phytoplankton fuels and sparks the rest of the food chain to go on from there. So this is nutrient upwelling. It's all of this deep water chock full of goodness that life needs to bloom and attract all the other animals. So if you drain the water out of the ocean, a large basin here, you'd see different features. Here we have a land mass. Here you have underwater mountain ranges that you're not obviously going to see because there'd be water above them. You have these seamounts, and sometimes you have islands sticking up above the seamounts. Sometimes the seamounts don't quite reach the surface of the water. And so the deep currents are flowing along, hitting these structures, and this is typically where the upwelling is occurring. So in a lot of the flat kind of desert ranges of the ocean, you're not necessarily going to have that upwelling. But once you're close to a landmass or an island or a seamount, you're going to have all that nutrient-rich water coming up towards the surface. So as we look around Antarctica, most of the Southern Ocean is very, very deep water, 4,000 to 6,000 meters deep. It's about 12,000 to 20,000 feet deep. And oftentimes it drops off very quickly. But I'm going to zoom in on the Antarctic Peninsula where we're going here in this yellow box, and we'll take a look at the bathymetry, or the underwater geography of this area. So you can see lots of canyons and valleys and dips. And this is these are the South Shetland Islands here. Here's the peninsula. You can see lots of interesting bathymetric features here. So as those currents are flowing along, they're hitting all those underwater structures that this image doesn't show you, but the previous one did. Those currents are flowing along the bottom and throughout the water column, hitting those features coming up. And so right around the peninsula, we have all of this life. So if you took a sonar image, you have this is an example of a seamount, and all of this red that you see above it is krill or other plankton food at the top of this, kind of associated in this area. And so in regions like this where you have this upwelling, you can expect to find animals. Well, certainly the fin whales that we saw today, they definitely were feeding. You might have seen after a couple times, you could see some reddish coloration in the water. That was whale poo, so they're definitely feeding, kind of hanging out in the same area. And it's quite possible that there were some underwater seamounts and interesting features providing that upwelling that they were associated with. So that's a little bit about upwelling, and we'll talk about it much more as we go on. I'm going to pass the microphone off to Lukey.
So most of you are seasoned sailors by now, even if it's the first time you get on the ship and haven't gone through the Drake, infamous Drake, right? So we were chatting earlier, and this is something you might have heard about, the Beaufort wind scale. Just a little bit of information about that. Now, Sir Francis Beaufort, an Irishman, young officer of the Royal Navy, he actually has a connection with the places we are traveling because he was the one that's responsible for devising this wind scale in 1805. Now before that, you can imagine the captains getting together after they've been all over the world chatting and having a beer or something. Oh, my gale was bigger than yours, you know, like fishermen. No, I had 10 meters swell, and we had 20 meters swell, and the masts were, you know, there was no agreement. It was very arbitrary. And what he intended with this scale is to have some kind of agreement in which to describe the conditions of the ocean, conditions of the weather, the sea, and the wind. And there is further connection because he, as a young officer, was commissioned to study. He was an hydrographer, the Rio de la Plata estuary. Basically, if you ask me, my country, El Rio de la Plata, where we started this trip. I know some of you are coming from way up north in Florida, but anyway, around Buenos Aires, Montevideo, he actually did a lot of work there, and the admiral was so impressed that he was a young officer quickly gaining positions within the Royal Navy. He was head of a hydrological office for many, many years. And there's further more connection with our trip, because it was after, you know, a little bit of a trial and error and so on, this system, and it's in place until now, of course now with technology it's different, but the system remains the same or similar. It was first officially used in the HMS, or during the HMS Beagle expedition, in which Captain Robert Fitzroy was in command. One of these trips, Darwin was on board, and we are going to the Beagle Channel after Antarctica. So you see how the connections are kind of a dots tied together. So these two images don't show anything, they're totally confusing, small font, and I will make a simpler way to understand the Beaufort scale. If you were with me a few minutes, Beaufort goes from 0 to 12, although some people want to add a few more after that, but let's say the traditional. Instead of reading the effects on land and the sea, let's illustrate it with these old photos from the Navy, in which we'll describe very briefly the condition. So basically Beaufort, 0 to 12. The wind rating, speed in meters per second or in knots, don't get confused with numbers. In green, the effects on land, which are not too conspicuous because you're in the ocean anyway. And the sea state, which is more interesting. And now I took in the liberty of adding an extra thing, which is, let's say, the unofficial Beaufort scale, which is a sailor's psychological state, right? So let's move onwards. Beaufort 0, like, you know, come on, are you kidding me? There's nothing there. If you're on land, the smoke will rise vertically, not even a breeze. The sea is like a mirror, and the sailor is suffering great boredom, right? Beaufort 1, you have 2 knots of wind, light air, still a very gentle breeze you will have trouble identifying, and our sailor is still bored, and the sea doesn't look anymore like a mirror, there's a bit of a ripple here and there. Beaufort 2, a light breeze, you can feel that breeze in your face if you're standing on land. The ocean will have very small wavelets, and our sailor is just feeling a little bit of pleasure, saying, okay, I signed up the Navy, now let's conquer the world. And Beaufort 3, things get more interesting, gentle breeze, you have flags flapping on land, right? If you have a mast with a flag. Larger wavelets in the ocean, and then our sailor is, you know, his chest is going up, and he's, oh, there we go, pleasure. Beaufort 4, 13 knots of wind, a little bit more. Moderate breeze, small branches of trees begin moving and sort of swaying one way and the other. The waves are becoming longer, and you start spotting the very first whitecaps in the ocean. Our sailor is filled with great pleasure. Beaufort 5, we continue within the breeze, we still don't have like proper wind. Small trees move, you know, we had branches moving earlier, now the whole tree's moving a little bit. And moderate waves, more whitecaps, widespread whitecaps around the ocean, and a little bit of spray, bits of water flying out, becoming airborne, and our sailor is totally full of delight. So, Beaufort 6, strong breeze. Now, larger branches in trees, we're talking about serious trees, are starting to move. Large waves forming under the ocean, extensive whitecaps everywhere, and more spray up in the air. And our sailor is still in the light, you know, sure of himself, and there's a tinge of anxiety coming here and there, in this poor man there. Beaufort 7, the whole tree's moving now, right? The sea's heaving up, waves are increasing.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. Well, it is a beautiful day, as it has been the whole day, and we are now passing the first rather large iceberg on starboard side, and that's a penguins on top of it, so for those who are interested, have a look.
Thanks, Captain. one of these. We cordial welcome to go outside. We have a few more minutes to go there. Beaufort 7, our sailor has anxiety tinged with fear. Beaufort 8, you're in a gale now, so a proper storm, let's say. The twigs of those trees have fallen off and gone with the wind. The waves are growing and growing and growing. Our sailor has fear tinged with terror. Beaufort 9, there is a structural damage on buildings and structures on land. The waves are high. The streaks of foam are forming perpendicular to the shape of the waves. And our sailor is full of great terror, asking why on earth he signed into the Navy. Beaufort 10, storm. The trees are uprooted, falling on the ground, no longer standing. Very, very high waves with long overhanging crests. The surface of the sea takes on a white appearance. The rolling of the sea becomes heavy and shock-like. And our sailor is full of panic. But still the story doesn't end there. You're in a violent storm. Beaufort 11. More trees, more damage, and there's even room for more panic. Now we're reaching the end of the scale at Beaufort 10 when you're in a hurricane, more than 70 knots of wind, and then you can imagine the damage and what the conditions of the sea. There's no visibility, foam flowing here and there. But what we want to know truly is what's happening to our sailor. There's no more room for terror, nor any panic. Just pray.
Thank you very much, Luki. And ladies and gentlemen.